What if the loudest part of Tupac's last night wasn't the moment everything erupted outside? What if the real turning point happened earlier, behind a closed door, inside a private room, with the wrong people in the same building? Because Gene Deal has been pushing a version of that Vegas night that doesn't just raise questions, it rearranges the entire board. In his telling, Jay-Z wasn't just somewhere in Vegas. According to his account, he was in the same building, deliberately staying out of sight. And Deal frames it as if Tupac knew this and wanted answers immediately, face to face. Now, none of this is presented as courtroom proof. This is Deal's story, an insider-style account of what he claims he saw, what he claims he heard, and what he says the room felt like when the pressure was at its peak. But here's why people can't ignore it, even as an allegation, it's specific. A private room. A hidden presence. A confrontation that almost happened. A decision that stopped it. And then the night ends with history. So the real question becomes this: if Deal's version is even partly accurate, what does that imply about the moments before everything went public? Deal paints the atmosphere like this: Vegas at maximum tension. East Coast and West Coast energy already boiling. The industry split into camps, not just music camps, but money camps, power camps, and loyalty camps. Tupac was at the center of it all, loud, fearless, and already convinced people were moving strangely around him. And then, according to Deal, there's a detail most fans never place into the scene: Jay-Z was in the building. In Deal's version, not out front, not visible, not part of the show, just there, in a back room, private and quiet. Deal frames that as a problem because, in his telling, Tupac wasn't in the mood for politics. He wasn't in the mood for later. He wanted answers now, about respect, about loyalty, and about what he believed was happening behind the curtain. And that's where Deal's story sharpens.
Guess Pac had got whiffed that Jay-Z was in town. Well, you know he gonna do a show because Jay-Z, he doing a show. But you gotta realize Jay-Z had became an enemy of Pac because I think he had said some or was gonna do a song with Big or whatever like that, the whole 9 yards. So Jay is now Pac's enemy. So he gets a phone call saying that Jay is not gonna come out the room because Tupac threatened him. So he's not gonna do his show. Can he make some phone calls, you understand, to get Pac off the bullshit?
In his telling, Jay-Z doesn't come out. He stays behind closed doors while Tupac pushes toward the moment. Deal describes the tension as something you could feel in your teeth, the kind of silence where everyone is listening for the first word that might set the entire place on fire. And then Suge Knight steps in. Deal recalls Suge shutting it down with a simple line: give him a pass.
I think he may have talked to Big D, and Big D and Eric B called Suge, and Suge was laughing, saying that wasn't him, because they tried to make it seem like it was Suge that was doing it, but it was Pac. So I guess Suge called Pac. Pac let him go ahead and do his show and everything like that. But Jay was scared to come out.
6 words. 1 decision. And suddenly, the confrontation that could have detonated the room never happened. That's the moment people rewind, because Suge wasn't known for cooling situations down. If anything, his reputation was the opposite. So why, in Deal's framing, does Suge suddenly become the break? Why does the man known for escalating choose containment instead? Deal's implication is clear: Suge understood the stakes. Not a fight. Not an argument. A collision. A collision that could have pulled names into the daylight. A collision that could have exposed relationships nobody wanted exposed.
Come on, man. Yeah, he was scared. Probably still is scared.
Yeah, that's crazy, man. And Suge, he told Pac to chill out.
Yeah, Suge told Pac to chill out. You know what I'm saying? Because, see, they was trying to, you got to realize is that it was going to call a dissension because they was trying to start Death Row East Coast.
A collision that could have dragged money and influence into a spotlight nobody could control. Because if Tupac walks into that room and starts talking the way he talked, you don't control what he says, and you definitely don't control what someone says when they feel cornered. That's why Deal's version doesn't play like simple gossip. It plays like a near miss. A moment that almost happened. A moment that would have created an entirely new story before the old story even began. And if you're wondering why this matters, Deal's point is simple: the quiet part of the night explains the loud part.
I told you this story, if you don't mind me asking.
I was there.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that, man. I didn't know you was there. So you was there when Jay was scared to come out of his hotel room. I had no idea, man.
I used to roll with Chaz every day.
Now Deal also pulls other major names back into the orbit, including Diddy, not as a here's the proof accusation, but as a figure he suggests had far more proximity to the broader tensions and behind-the-scenes realities of that era than the public narrative ever admitted. In other words, Deal isn't just telling a who was where story. He's telling a how the story gets shaped story. How pressure gets redirected. How scenes get avoided. How certain names don't end up in the wrong moment at the wrong time. How the public sees chaos, while the insiders see a chessboard. And that's where Deal's version forces an uncomfortable question: if Jay-Z was staying hidden in Deal's account, what was he afraid of?
I used to roll with Chaz every day, bro. And then it came out. And then it came out, somebody else told the story. But I think it may have been Dame Dash or something like that told the story.
Deal's framing suggests it wasn't random fear. It was fear of the wrong conversation happening in front of the wrong people. Fear of being pulled into the hottest conflict in the culture while still building his rise. Fear of becoming part of a scene that couldn't be managed once it started. And then there's the second question, the one that makes this whole thing stick. Why was Tupac so locked in on him that night? Deal implies it wasn't just beef. It was what Tupac believed Jay-Z represented in that moment: rising power, East Coast gravity, and industry politics Pac didn't trust.
Right after Suge Knight made that statement, what did Puff do? He got on stage, because if a brick hits you, say ouch. He got on stage and spoke on it. You know, another executive come up here speaking on that. I love Dr. J, I love what they doing. I get Death Row, they props in the whole 9 yards. If he thought he was talking about Jermaine Dupri, why the fuck would he spin and say something right then?
And if that was the vibe in the room, then Sugg stepping in starts to look less like protecting Jay-Z and more like protecting the room itself, protecting what could have been said, protecting what could have been overheard, protecting what could have been carried outside and then weaponized. Because once words like that leave a room, they don't go back in.
We're in Atlanta that something was bought and he thought I was gonna lie about it because Puff was trying to say it was his and it wasn't his, it was Big's. And you understand? And when he said, and they had made a bet that I was gonna go on Puff's side. So when I got to the studio, I said, nah, Puff, you had that one and Big had that one. And that's what it was.
In Deal's telling, after Suge speaks, everything goes quiet. Jay-Z stays unseen. Tupac pauses. And everyone in that space understands they just avoided a moment that would have changed the timeline. Not because it would have instantly solved the mystery, but because it would have altered the emotional map: who was where, how people were acting, who looked nervous, who looked protected, and what kind of pressure existed before the moment everything erupted outside and turned the city into a headline. Now here's where Deal's story shifts from controversial to explosive. Because he doesn't keep it in Vegas. He hints that there are receipts, not vibes, not theories, but something tangible. Recordings. Documents. Material that, in his framing, could connect dots people have argued about for decades.
The tension and beef started between Death Row and Bad Boy.
All the tension started between Puff and Suge Knight. You understand? All the tension came from Puff and Suge Knight. Suge wanted Puff to have Big them do a show. Puff wanted to get paid for Big doing the show. But Suge had did a whole lot of free shit for Puff at one time. Because when Puff used to come out to California, before he could afford security, before he could afford that, Suge used to look out for the cat. Tupac fuck with East Coast and West Coast niggas. How you gonna have nice and smooth out there with him and they from the East Coast? You understand what I'm saying? He with niggas from the East Coast, West Coast, down south, the whole 9 yards. Pac had some shit with him, yeah. But all them niggas had shit with them. All them niggas behind scenes talk shit.
And he points to a place that instantly sends the internet into a spiral: Cuba. Important distinction, this is not verified. It's Deal's claim, his suggestion, his direction. But it lands harder than vague rumors because it's specific. It's not somewhere overseas. It's not a friend of a friend said. It's Cuba.
Still alive and well, Suge Jr. has been posting images of Tupac posing with celebs, saying that the rapper lives in Malaysia now and the Illuminati knows all about it. Meantime, today, Suge himself has been sentenced to 28 years in prison for killing a man with his truck in Compton, California, 4 years ago.
And the second you name a place like that, you invite the obvious question. If you're making it up, you can be challenged. If you keep repeating it anyway, you're either bluffing or you believe there's something out there. That's what makes people fixate on the Cuba angle, because it implies strategy. It implies someone understood consequences. It implies somebody treated information like leverage and kept it somewhere they believed would stay quiet.
Like Pac having one lung, for example, you know what I mean? Never have his voice again. You know, Pac loved music. You know, I think they had to remove a finger, something. She like, I know my son. His pride, he probably wouldn't be able to live like that. You know, she just felt like he fought enough, and she decided to, you know, let him go. No one questioned her and said, why did you do it and stuff like that. You know, people just supported her decision.
And if you accept that possibility for even a moment, the next question becomes unavoidable. Who had the access to move it? Who had the resources to keep it hidden? Who understood what it could do if it surfaced? Because random fans don't move paper trails. Random fans don't relocate recordings. Random fans don't stash receipts for decades. If Deal's implication is right, it points to people with reach, people with relationships, people who understood that the most dangerous thing isn't the rumor, it's the proof. Now, pause there. This is where most stories collapse into pure fantasy. But Deal's narrative doesn't need to be fully proven to explain why it keeps resurfacing, because it follows a pattern people recognize. A private moment almost happens. A powerful figure prevents it. The public never hears the details. Then the night turns into history. Then the story gets simplified. Then the simplified story becomes the only story. And years later, someone who claims proximity says, you missed the part that mattered. Deal's part that mattered is the room, the silence, the hidden presence, the avoided confrontation, the decision to prevent a chain reaction. And if that's true, it changes how you interpret the night, not who was responsible, but how the night built to that point. Because the closer you look, the more that night starts to feel less like random chaos and more like pressure being managed. Which brings us to the real cliffhanger. If Deal is willing to publicly frame it like Jay-Z was in the building and stayed hidden in his account, if he's willing to suggest major figures around that era may have had deeper context than the public record ever showed, if he's willing to hint at receipts and even point toward Cuba, then what is he building toward? Because naming a place invites verification. It plants the idea that something could be checked, that something could be found, that somebody could go looking. And if somebody ever seriously goes looking, the conversation changes. It stops being internet debate. It becomes what can actually be confirmed. That's what keeps this version from dying, not because everyone believes it, but because it introduces a missing layer, private rooms, private decisions, and the suggestion that the public saw the explosion while the real tension happened in silence. So the core question isn't only who was responsible. The core question becomes, who controlled the narrative afterward? Who benefited from keeping it simple? Who had the influence to make sure certain details stayed off the public timeline? Because if the room mattered the way Deal suggests, then the aftermath matters too. Who protected who stayed invisible, who left the building with the story already shaped? And if Deal's version is pointing toward anything, it's this: the truth people argue about isn't only about the final moment. It's about the pressure that night created and the decisions made in rooms nobody ever saw. So the next time you hear "we already know what happened," ask yourself one thing: if we know everything, why do these versions keep resurfacing with names, rooms, and alleged receipts? And why do those versions always orbit the same uncomfortable idea, that the loudest part of that night distracted everybody from the quiet part that might explain the rest? And if you're into stories like this, where the loudest moment isn't always the most important one, then you'll probably want the next video too. I'll see you there. Until then, stay safe, stay sharp, and take care of yourself.